What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Blerded Out. New One Piece chapter has dropped 1133, and man, it's such a good chapter. Like, if this was the last chapter of the year, I'd be fine with that because I was in my feels this chapter. So we're going to talk about that today. I think that's probably going to be it. I might do some seasonal coverage, but it might be a short episode this time, and then next time will probably be the longer episode, and it'll probably be the end of the season. Considering I think the next chapter will be the last one we get of the year. Because we're going on break now, and I think we get one more chapter in 2 weeks, and that'll be the last chapter since we have all the holidays, the breaks, everything like that. So we should get one more chapter of this year, and then we're done. But as always, a word from our sponsors. Thank you for tuning in to Blerd It Out. Whether you're listening from YouTube on my channels like Taran King Kumo or Blerd Out Podcast, or one of the many podcast sites like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more, I appreciate your support. If you want to listen to older episodes of the podcast, head on over to Patreon. If you join as a free member, you can watch all the old episodes from the old seasons for free. Plus, there'll be other content that didn't quite make it to an episode or on a YouTube video that you can check out there as well. Your support means the world.
Talking all things, we chillin' like Okiji. Better activate your Byakugan so you can see me. Coming at you left, right, up, down, sideways. Reactions, reviews, maybe even let's plays. On his droid boy, trying to make you laugh, make you smile. We about to set sail, so sit back and stay a while. It's Blerd. Get out.
And if you have not caught up to the latest chapters or episodes, please note there will be spoilers ahead.
Spoilers. Okay,
chapter 1133, Praise Me. So, seeing the title name, I kind of guessed what the chapter was going to be about. It kind of threw me off because I didn't figure Robin would be that type of character. But it makes sense down the line just because of what's happening here and who she runs into. But let's start with the cover story. So it turns out Hold'em has been out here in the woods jumping people. And it's not made clear if he's the one who's stole the sword or if he's the one who's been stealing the women, but we know he's out here in the forest. And it looks like he cooked Speed, because Speed's on the ground, charred up, smoke rising from her, and he's holding on to Tama again. And this is very reminiscent of Wano, because this is basically what Hold'em was doing in Wano, was holding Tama captive. Only this time, instead of Luffy being here, it's Yamato. I assume it's going to end up the same way, with Yamato knocking the lights out of Hold'em. And then we'll probably get some information from Hold'em on where other beast pirates are. And this is interesting. This is interesting. Like, people might be sighing about seeing Hold'em again. I, for one, I like what it could bring to the table, because it means we might be able to see what happened to the other beast pirates. Considering the fact that Green Bull got walked off by Shanks, we don't know who got picked up and who didn't get picked up. You know, we only saw King and Queen and like other fodder in the Udon prison. So it's very possible that like headliners, lower tier parts, that the Tobi Roppo even might not be captured yet. And if you know me at all, you know I said all that because it means we might see Ulti again, and that's all I really care about. So good things are happening in the cover story. Now, onto the chapter. We started off with the flashback of Ahara. And not a deep dive into Ahara, just spanning, going over basically what he saw and endured while he was there. And this is like a horror story to him, which I think makes the most sense because as far as the Marines that were there and Marines in general, I don't think Buster calls were so relevant that they echoed it in anybody's mind. It's almost like, I would say God Valley was the last time a Buster call was done. At least that anyone knows about. It's entirely possible that God Valley could have been wiped out by the ancient weapon, and or they've been using ancient weapons instead of Buster calls to kind of handle some business. But based on the way Spandine talks, it seems like Buster calls are relatively rare and people don't really experience them. Now, based on the way Spandine talks, it doesn't seem like he knew that Akainu had the ship blown up. Because he said the civilian ship suddenly blew up and he could just hear the screams, and like that's basically traumatized him since then. But we know Akainu had that ship blown up, and it's odd because Aokiji and Saul knew as well. Now, Spandine, I believe at that point, was exiting the island because he had just shot Clover, so he should have been heading back to the ship. It's entirely possible he doesn't know that Akainu gave that order, and he just wasn't filled in. But it's also possible that he's just saying things to pin things on Robin. Because at the end of his recall, he says that Robin's a demon disguised as a kid. So clearly he's pinning some things on her. Because even the young Marines ask if it was Robin's fault that blew up. And he doesn't do anything to clarify it. Like, he doesn't directly say it's Robin's fault. But since the younger Marines, or like the people who are taking the notes, ask that, and he responds that way, it's basically an indirect confirmation that was Robin's fault. And in an interesting twist, we get like the montage. We got it before, where basically Robin was going home to home, trying to live, being hunted down by the government, being turned in by people who wanted the money, being mistreated by people who thought she was a demon. We've seen that before, but we kind of saw a bit more on the other side, where instead of seeing Robin, we're seeing the people she was dealing with. You know, we see the old lady she was living with. We see like normal families talking about how they can't sleep because Robin's around. You see like hunters, mercenaries, pirates with evil faces hunting her down. And we still see glimpses of Robin, but it's more just of her running and hiding. Like, not really direct interactions, more or less just what was going on at that time. And seeing this is always sad, because Robin's an 8-year-old child at this point who just had everything taken from her, like in one night. And even growing up, she really didn't have a lot of friends, especially friends her age. She had the archaeologist, but it was mostly a matter of similarity, where they're in the same field, so to speak. And so they respected Robin as an archaeologist, but you really wouldn't call them friends, because it's not like she hung out with them every single day. Most of the time she spent alone, just kind of reading or existing, until Saul showed up. And we get a scene of Robin standing on the cliff, basically talking to Saul's spirit. And I mean that, but she's talking to Saul in her mind. Like, Saul's not really there, but she's trying to like work up the strength to keep going. Because she's remembering Saul tell her to keep living and one day you'll meet people. And her response to that is that she's scared and everyone's scary. Which, again, 8-year-old child trying to live being hunted down by the world. So that line makes the most sense. We do get a couple panels actually, of Robin checking the books and looking for O'Hara, and it's not on the map. Very similar to God Valley, where once they erase something, no longer exists. And it's odd, because I thought O'Hara was a bit more understood as a tragedy, where it seems in some places it just was entirely wiped from history. So like some places know about O'Hara, probably more in the know places, more marine places, they know about O'Hara. I guess it wouldn't be surprising if there are stretches of the world that just never heard of this island. So once it was basically eradicated, they got rid of it to make sure there wasn't any questions about it. That's how the government works. And kind of a final panel of the flashback is just Robin running and people saying terrible things about her, like how she should die, demon. They keep saying that she's using her appearance as a child to make her way across, almost like she really is a demon just posing as a kid, which it's terrible. Like, it's absolutely terrible. It reminds me a lot, and I did a video on this a long time ago, It reminds me of Ace, where I think Ace dealt with this a little bit less because no one knew who he was. They still said these same things, but they were all hypothetical. They were all, oh, if Roger did have a kid, this is how I'd feel. This is what I'd say. And he took that as insult because, I mean, obviously he knows he's Roger's kid, so he knows who you're talking about. Robin, on the other hand, this is all direct. This is all to her face. These people are awful to her. Despite not knowing anything about her, despite not interacting with her all that much, these people are just straight up calling her an actual demon. And we see that she's trying to cope by doing the dairy she laugh. And just like how she did it in the boat when O'Hara was burning, like she's crying while doing it. So it's doing what it can. It's not helping all that much. She's still suffering horribly. But we jump back to present day Elbaf, and everyone arrives in the port. And it looks like there are multiple ports, which makes sense because of how big Elbaf is. So like they probably have like a north, a west, east, and a south port, depending on where the ships are coming in from. We get everyone in the meetup, and they have one of these cool things called a mist ship. So like this is how they travel within the island, I think. So like you use a big ship to get to the island, you use the Rainbow Bridge, you land in the port, and then they have these mist ships, which are almost like gondolas that ride on clouds. It's a really cool concept. And you even have like Vegapunk looking at all these different technologies existing in one place. And based on something he said last chapter, it seemed like he had seen this before and maybe even copied some of this technology. I'll have to look at the translations of both this chapter and last chapter to see how exactly, because it's Lilith talking about it, but if Lilith has Vegapunk's memories and Vegapunk has been here before, it would make sense. Nami gives Robin a thumbs up on the hair, and Robin gives a thumbs up on the drip. You love to see him interact. And then we run into Hydrutin. Obviously, Luffy remembers him and stuff like that, so they're all celebrating. Oddly enough, Hydrutin says the four of us are the new giant warrior pirates. So it's like, because I think Road, who is crucified in the background, whispers it's 5, but it doesn't seem like anybody actually likes Road. So I'm like, what is he doing on the crew? Honestly. Not a single person here seems to care that Road exists. Like they treat him like Caesar almost. Just absolute disdain for his existence. Yeah, everybody meets up. They briefly mention how the news about Big Mom going down in Wano came here to Elbaf. And I think a lot of people thought about that in the community, where once Elbaf hears that Luffy brought down Big Mom, it would basically make him pretty revered in this land because of what Big Mom did. And Gerd especially mentions that, you know, Big Mom used to be cool with us, but then something terrible happened. But they skipped that because they want to do a toast. They want to celebrate, they had tons of food, they want to drink, they want to have fun. And right before they do that, Robin stops Luffy for a second, and I think she tells him that she wants to go see Saul, because in the next panel, she says she's fine going alone, but Luffy wants to go with her. And this immediately was like the start of just a heartwarming moment, because you have Luffy who's hungry and was just told there's a mountain of food waiting for him and a celebration. You know how Luffy loves food and celebrations more than anything. But when Robin brought up Saul and that she wanted to go see him, Luffy immediately said, I'm going with you. He chose something over food, which is not something that Luffy does, but because of who Saul is and what Robin means to Luffy, he was like, nah, we doing that first. And not only that, I'm going with you. And so the rest of the crew tag along as well. And so we have Gerd piloting the mist ship, And she kind of gives us a breakdown of the area because we're going to the library. That's where Saul spends most of his time. Seems like he teaches classes here, so like he's kind of passing on history he got from O'Hara to different Elbaf citizens. And Luffy kind of more blankly explains why he's going, but he's saying that he has to greet the people that saved his crew. And this immediately makes me think of Ace again, where Ace was like, I have to give my thanks to Shanks at some point for saving Luffy. And I'm pretty sure this is where Luffy gets it from, where he's like, this person helped my crew member out so much, I have to make sure that I personally greet them and thank them for what they've done. And Robin is just, she's so bashful. She's like, oh, you actually remember my story? And it's like, of course Luffy does. Of course they all do. Why would they not remember that? But it also makes sense because Luffy very famously does not listen to a lot of backstories or stories in general. He usually falls asleep, doesn't pay attention. But it also means at some point, Robin did explain more in depth of what's going on with Saul, because the flashback we see is not one that's directly told. It just exists in Robin's mind at the time, because this is right where she's doing the I want to live speech. And so she doesn't like openly say that. She just thinks it at that time. So at some point, the crew must have interacted and she must have gotten more in depth with that story. They tell Dory and Broggy that they're going to go visit Saul. So they say, all right, just bring him back when you're done. We'll be waiting here. And I mean, they have tons of food, so I don't think anything's going anywhere. And they make it to the Owl Library. And this is basically where Saul spends all his time. It looks, I won't say a lot like the Tree of O'Hara. I think it's inspired by the Tree of O'Hara. Because what you have is a branch of the tree holding a building over some water. And if you remember O'Hara, it was basically just a big tree in the middle of an island that was kind of just secluded by itself. So I could see Saul like visualizing this area specifically and being like, I want to build a library here, or I want this to be the place where I spend my time. And like the kind of ocean and beach it creates is somewhat unnatural because it doesn't have like waves or like ebb and flow. It's not like the water is constantly moving in and out, especially because this is like on the upper level of the tree in the upper realm. But because water is flowing down, that's what kind of causes the motion. I'd imagine the water flows down from the highest points of the tree, comes through this area, and then creates this little reservoir that basically they call the spring. Now, Luffy is gung-ho about going to see Saul directly, but Nami kind of holds him back because it's Robin's moment, and we want her to kind of experience it by herself first. But upon getting there, we get the reveal that Saul has fallen over. Now, they mentioned this a couple of chapters back, but we never really expounded on it until now. But we get someone coming up and saying like he fell and can't get up. Now, the reaction of the crew is hilarious because they're somewhat upset. They're like, we just got here. What do you mean he can't move anymore? Like, you're messing up Robin's reunion. And they're saying that like anybody had a choice in that, where they're like, yeah, let's just knock him down right now. Obviously, Chopper's like, I can check up on him if he's actually hurt or something. But as soon as Robin sees him, she realizes what's going on, and then she kind of tells everybody to stay back for a little bit. And it's so sweet because he's been like this since probably, I think since before the Giants got to Elbaf. Like, they were still pulling up when they announced that Saul had fallen over. So he's been like this since then. But Robin walks up to him, completely like calm now, her nerves are gone. And Oda does this in the most magnificent way where he replicates chapter, I think 392. And he has Saul like in the water, waves brushing up on him, Robin just walking up on the beach. If you take this chapter and then line up with 392, it's basically the same event where Saul is just laying in the water and then Robin's walking up to him. He even, like, down to the same clothes. The only difference is that his clothes aren't tattered this time. Everything else is the same. And as soon as she gets there, he does like the little gua roar and tries to scare her. Obviously, it doesn't spook her. All she does is stare back at him. And basically what was happening was that he knew Robin was on the way. So he tried to do this to replicate what happened in the past, which is such a sweet thing. Especially like when I was saying earlier, is that he's been like this for a while. Like it wasn't like they were on their way to the owl library and he was like, all right, let me go set up. He did this when they were out in the ocean still. So he's been there for a little bit. For the amount of time at least it takes them to leave the ocean, ride the Rainbow Bridge, get to the port, and then ride the mist boat all the way over to the library. He's just been sitting like this. All for Robin, which just shows the care, the dedication, how much he cares about Robin. And naturally, he picks Robin up. He does his little laugh. Robin comments on it. And he hasn't seen her in 22 years. So he's like, you look just like Olvia now. Which is true. Honestly, they look exactly the same, except Olvia had white hair and Robin has black hair. It's the only difference between those two. Saul talks about the broadcast from Egghead, what Vegapunk was talking about, and basically gives him the thumbs up of like, you kind of kept Ohara going. You got that info out there, even though it was a risk to you and like anyone involved. And like Robin is kind of into that. She was like, I was there, you know, I kind of got bits and pieces of the message. I kind of understood what he was saying, but she's more interested in Saul because she's kind of like touching on his scars and basically asking like, how did you make it out of there? As we expected, it's because the fire of like the Buster Call melted the ice and he ended up falling into the sea. And he was frozen on like the cliff because that's how we saw the ship explode. He was running along that cliff line. So that's how he survived. Nothing too special there. Even if Aokichi did do it on purpose, it doesn't seem like Saul knew. He just thinks he got lucky at this point. So we'll have to see if Aokichi specifically did ice time capsule for a certain reason. Then he talks about how he realized a little bit later that she was alive and that they were saying like terrible things about her. And he starts going off like a tangent that makes him angry, but we see Robin kind of like mentally visualize what he meant and then move past it because she doesn't want to talk about that at this point. Like she's kind of over it. And what's kind of sad about this is that we had gotten to a point with Robin where it didn't seem like things were affecting her. Like she kind of embraced the demon epithet. So it's weird because at this point she's kind of like just trying to ignore it, not talk about it. She even says like, let's not talk about depressing things. And then she asks him to praise her for being alive, which he absolutely does. He says she's lived well for 22 years and now she's back. Now she's back with Saul. And we get a little bit more of a flashback where she's basically like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like she's crying to Saul and Clover and Olvia about she really doesn't want to keep going. And this manifests itself into the current timeline because she starts breaking down. And Saul does too. And it's like, it's a really sad moment, but also a really heartwarming moment too, because she's basically been holding this in for 22 years. With like no idea that she'd ever get to see Saul again. No idea that she would ever basically release these feelings. These have been buried down so deep that I think even after taking on the name Demon Child, and even after like kind of accepting that people might see her as a demon, seeing Saul again and kind of running through that memory lane, it brought all those old feelings back up. And I appreciate that because I wouldn't want it to be the case where all of that trauma didn't build up anywhere. Where it was kind of like, if she were to say, yeah, I'm over that now, it's fine. You know, I'm a demon now. I think her having a natural reaction being like, that sucked. Like, that really, really sucked. And I hated every second of it. Sure, I'm older now, I'm more mature, and I can take things like that. I was a kid. When I was a kid, that sucked. I had nobody to help me with that. So all that stuff, that's still here. I gotta get it out. And naturally, the entire crew is crying with her. Oh, and also, how did I miss that? I skimmed back through the chapter. Saul lost his leg. And it looks like it might have been the leg that Aokiji initially froze. So that may have been like a weaker spot. And it very well could have just snapped off during the Buster Call. It could have snapped off when he fell into the water at some point. But he doesn't have that leg anymore. That's his right leg. And I'm actually kind of curious. I want to go into the past for a quick second and see where he got froze at. Okay, chapter 397. He actually gets frozen on the left leg first, not the right leg. So I think that might lead more to, based on the way he fell after he thawed out, I think it could have just broken off there. Because if you imagine like the weight of a giant, but some of him frozen, some of him is thawed out. If he falls over and like part of his leg is still frozen to the ground, I could very well see it breaking off. That you know what? I found Zoro. Apparently he's sitting there with Luffy. Yeah, okay, I see him. He's sitting there with Luffy and Jinbei. I just missed him. But yes, the chapter ends with them breaking down and crying, enjoying their reunion. As I said before, we are going to be on break. Next chapter will have a color spread, so expect to see some Oda greatness. Like I said, that'll probably end up being the last chapter of the year. And if it comes in the December 23rd issue, which is in 3 weeks, we'll probably be seeing the last chapter around the 19th, maybe, depending on how scans go. 19th, 20th, somewhere along there, we'll be seeing that last chapter. But as I said at the beginning of the episode, this was a fantastic chapter, such a heartwarming experience. Like them, when Oda goes into his Robin bag, I think that's one of the best bags they can go into. Robin's story and her character are so good that it's hard to miss when you're writing like just Robin lore. Give me more Robin, as much Robin as you can. Give it to me. I will always eat it up every single time. And I'm happy that she actually did get to see Saul and that he's not dead and or dying. He seems fine. It doesn't really save him from death this arc, but at the time, at the moment, in the now, he's alive. So we'll see how things carry on. We'll see once Luffy actually interacts and the rest of the crew interacts with him. I do want to see like one interaction between Luffy and Saul, just because they made that very important declaration that he does have to thank Saul for what he's done. So I do want to see that. I still want to see Silhouette Man. I got to see what's going on with Luffy and Loki. We got so much going on here. I'm genuinely excited for the next chapter. But yep, that's the end here. As far as the content for the next few weeks, we're obviously going to have the episode when the latest chapter drops. So we might get 2 more episodes of the podcast this year. And then after that episode drop, that'll be the end of the season. So once the last chapter drops, we'll end the season there, redo some things, and the next year we'll start the new season with the newest chapter probably. I will be doing some stuff on the main channel as well. Expect to see some top 10s because obviously it's that time of year. We got to do the top 10 strongest. I want to do some other top 10s as well, so keep an eye out for those. If you are waiting for the rest of Arcane, that's going to be on Patreon. Episodes 7 through 9. I'm going to upload those there uncut, so hop over there and see those if you want to. But that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Catch you in the next one. Peace.